Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It's great to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, coming up on this show this hour, we're going to have an interesting conversation with Matt Gaspers at 30 past the hour. Pope Francis met with the Buddhists again, which, okay, I don't have a problem with him meeting with Buddhists or Muslims or atheists or anybody else. He's the Pope. He should be doing that. Praise be to God. The problem is in thinking that all things are equal. And in fact, we're coming up on the anniversary of his document on human fraternity, which seemed to indicate that God wills the plurality of religion. That's a problem. We're going to have that conversation and remember why that's a problem with Matt Gaspers at 30 past the hour. Do join us for that if you can. Also in the news, it seems like Donald Trump wants to defund USAID, to shut it down. DOGE has been going through all of the government departments to figure out where the wasteful spending is. DOGE was forbidden access to what's going on at USAID. People are being laid off. It's becoming a big issue. But as Michael Hitchborn and Lepanto Institute has made clear, there are clear connections. Catholic connections to USAID. In fact, they seem to have been funding a whole lot of contraception, abortion, perverse sexual training in places like Africa and around the world. Well, they're not the only ones concerned. It seems like a lot of people are suggesting that USAID was a front for the CIA. We're going to have a conversation about this with Mike Koeniger at 14 past the hour. So lots of great conversation in the news. By the way, it's breaking today that the Texas National Guard has been deputized and can now make arrests on the southern border, increasing the force to about 4,000 extra people to help to police and secure our southern border. All very interesting in the news today. We're going to get caught up with you, and we're going to put the links to the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. So make sure to hang out there. Make sure to sign up to the email list and be on the team with the podcast and all of that. Let's pray. Let's get started. Much to get to. Do share us with a friend, though. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Blaise, pray for us. Blaise was the bishop of Sebasta in Asia Minor, and served as a physician before taking holy orders. During the Diocletian persecution, the holy bishop took refuge in a mountain cave, but he was eventually discovered by the Roman governor's men and thrown into prison. Blaise worked many miracles of healing while ministering to his fellow prisoners, and most notably, he saved the life of a boy who was choking to death on a bone that was stuck in his throat. The saint refused to apostatize before the governor and was sent to be tortured. He was beaten with iron rods and then stretched on the rack while the pagans tore his flesh with metal combs, like those used to card wool. Blaise nevertheless persevered in confessing the faith, and was finally beheaded on this day in the year of our Lord 316. Veneration of St. Blaise spread all over Christendom, especially due to countless miracles involving ailments of the throat. And on his feast day, the Church traditionally administers an official blessing of throats with 2 crossed candles. St. Blaise is numbered among the 14 holy helpers, and he is particularly hailed as a patron of the wool trade. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints-and-seasons. St. Blaise, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Families visit crash site days after the deadliest U.S. air disaster in a generation. Families of victims visited the crash site of the deadliest U.S. air disaster in nearly 25 years, located just outside of Washington, D.C. The crash involved an American Airlines jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter, resulting in 67 fatalities. As of Saturday afternoon, 42 remains have been recovered from the Potomac River, with 38 positively identified. This incident marks the deadliest U.S. air disaster since November the 12th, 2001, when a jet crashed in Queens, New York. Epoch Times reports Rubio demands Panama reduce Chinese influence over the canal or else. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned Panamanian President Jose Raul Molino that Panama must reduce Chinese influence over the Panama Canal or face potential U.S. action. Rubio stated that President Donald Trump believes China's presence violates a treaty regarding the canal's control. Molino has firmly stated that there will be no negotiation over canal ownership despite some protests in Panama. There are suggestions that Panama might consider a compromise regarding canal operations, particularly concerning the Hutchinson ports. And Catholic Vote reports Arlington Bishop says church supports border control. A leading American bishop offered important clarity on immigration in a Friday pastoral letter. Deportation and border enforcement can be justified and moral, argued Bishop Michael Burbidge of Arlington, Virginia. Contrary to some voices in the church, he explained that Catholics, quote, must not presume a conflict between human dignity and the rule of law, close quote. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Mark chapter 1. Or let me start over. The gospel today comes to us from Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. And they came over the strait of the sea into the country of the Gerasenes. And as he went out to the ship, immediately there met him out of the mountains a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling in the tombs. And no man could bind him, not even with chains. For having been often bound with fetters and chains, he had burst the chains and broken the fetters in pieces, and no one could tame him. And he was always day and night in the mountains, crying and cutting himself with stones. And seeing Jesus afar off, he ran and adored him. And crying with a loud voice, he said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he had said unto him, Go out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he saith to him, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he besought him much, that he would not drive him away out of the country. And there was there near the mountain a great herd of swine feeding. And the spirits besought him, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And Jesus immediately gave them leave. And the unclean spirits, going out, entered into the swine. And the herd with great violence was carried headlong into the sea, being about 2,000, and were stifled in the sea. And they that fed them fled, and told it in the city and in the fields. And they went out to see what was done. And they came to Jesus, and they see him that was troubled with the devil sitting, clothed, and well in his wits, and they were afraid. And they that had seen it told them in what manner he had been dealt with, who had the devil, and concerning the swine. And they began to pray him that he would depart from their coasts. And when he went up into the ship, he that had been troubled with the devil began to beseech him that he might be with him. And he admitted him not, but saith to him, Go into thy house, to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had mercy upon thee. And he went his way, and began to publish in Decapolis how great things Jesus had done for him, and all men wondered. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Could you imagine seeing a miracle like this done and then saying, we need you to leave, Jesus. We don't want you around here. Just let that sink in, especially in light of someone's eternal judgment. St. Gregory of Nyssa, 4th century bishop, would say, now the assembly of the devils had prepared itself to resist the divine power, but when he was approaching, who had power over all things, Jesus, they proclaim aloud his imminent virtue. Wherefore there follows, but when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him. St. Chrysostom would say, then praying to him, he subjoins, I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. For he considered being cast out to be the torment, or else he was also invisibly tortured. For however bad the devils are, they know that there awaits them at last a punishment for their sins. They want to stay here because where they are going is infinitely worse, and they know it. Remigius, a 9th century priest, would say the devils entered not into the swine of their own will, but their asking for this concession was that it might be shown that they cannot hurt men without divine permission. The devils are dogs on a chain. They have to have permission. Either you give them permission through mortal sin or playing and dabbling in the occult, or God gives them permission to bring about a greater good. Either way, they can only act according to God's divine plan and will. The Venerable Bede would say, or else, conscious of their own frailty, they judged themselves unworthy of the presence of the Lord. And it goes on, and when he was going to the ship, he that had been tormented, etc. The Afflicate would say, be amazed at the miracle which they had heard. They were afraid. For this reason, they beseech him to depart out of their borders. They did not want Jesus around. Do you? Make that choice today and stick to it. We'll be right back.
Did you know you can help evangelize simply by using your cell phone? The Station of the Cross is partnering with iCatholic Mobile, America's only Catholic mobile phone company. When you join iCatholic Mobile, a portion of every dollar will support our programming. Plus, you'll enjoy great service with iCatholic Unlimited 5G data, text and talk. With iCatholic Mobile, you can stay connected with family and friends while also spreading the truth of Jesus Christ with clarity and charity. Join today at iCatholicMobile.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, tomorrow we're going to celebrate the anniversary of the document on human fraternity, which came out back in 2019, on February the 4th, 2019. And this in light of Pope Francis recently visiting with the Buddhist monks again. You know, and I don't have a problem with a meeting with monks. I really don't. But I do have problems with some of the things written in the document that seem to suggest God wills the plurality of religion. Well, he may tolerate it, but will it? That's kind of an issue. There are issues in the document that I want to talk to Matt Gaspers about, and all of that coming up at 30 past the hour. But over the weekend, one of the big news breaks was that USAID might get shut down. Elon Musk is calling for it. Donald Trump seems to agree that it should be shut down because USAID refused to allow the DOJ department to figure out how they spend that money. And some people are actually calling for a shutdown because USAID is a part of the CIA and helped to overthrow the Ukrainian government back in the day. But I'm going to play this couple of clips really quickly here because you might recall we've covered this topic in some detail on the program. Have a listen to this.
Any country receiving funding from USAID has an obligation to fill out reports saying this is what we are doing to reduce the fertility rates of our country.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we covered this. In fact, I drove all the way to Virginia to go to a press conference to talk about CRS taking big bucks from USAID to give out condoms, abortion, perverse sexual training. Have a listen.
Finally, 2 questions. Did CRS receive financial support from institutions, in this case USAID and PEPFAR, that pursue ends contrary to Church's teaching? Related to this is the second. Did CRS receive funding for the implementation of initiatives, even in part, whose ends are not in conformity with the church's teaching.
I'm going to link to both of those videos in the show notes for you today. I did an entire expose after the press conference I went to with Mike Koeniger, who joins me now to talk about it. Mike, it's been a year, almost quite. I think it was March of last year when we did that together in Virginia.
Almost a year and nothing's changed, Joe. And by the way, who are those two good-looking fellas in that front row there?
I don't know who the old guy is on the left, but that young, good-looking, handsome fellow with the glasses on the right. Woof, man.
Okay. Anyway, no, you and I were exchanging messages about this week, and I've got some strong opinions. And first off, why are my tax dollars going to support the murder of infants in their mother's womb in Africa? Why is this fund being used? Basically, in some of the reports I read this weekend, Joe, those funds are being used to support organizations that are anti-American, not just sort of don't like America. I mean, vehemently anti-American. And then the third thing that I find troubling, and if it is indeed true, is why is it being used to send money to friends of the Democratic Party on the sly? And so if any one of those three are true, it seriously needs to end. And if all three of those are true, it should have been ended a long time ago. And by the way, this is the one issue I think most voters agree on when we hear them talk in polls and interviews is foreign aid. This is foreign aid in every single way, except, of course, those things that go to folks who are doing work for the Democratic Party. But Joe, the big problem I have is even if this money was actually getting to the people, is it getting to the right people? And we know, and a long time ago when I was a young man, there was a huge famine in Northern Africa, Ethiopia specifically, and songs were written, all kinds of things came out about this. And Joe, quite frankly, the United States sends millions and millions and millions of dollars in aid to Ethiopia, sent millions and millions of pounds of rice. And Joe, you know where you could get the rice in Ethiopia?
Where?
At the local market, because the strongmen would seize the rice, take it to the market, and sell it to the people, even though we gave it to the Ethiopian people. And this is the fundamental problem I have. I can criticize our church on how we do charity, and you and I both have, but on the whole, the church is much better at distributing food and aid to people who are homeless and hungry than any government agency ever has been. And that's the bottom line. My money goes to the church because I think the church does a better job.
Mike Benz over on X, I'm going to link to his feed as well, because he's asking a lot of big questions about USAID. I mean, Michael Hitchborn has been doing this for a decade now. The Lepanto Institute has been trying to raise the alarm about USAID and their nefarious actions to spread immorality in places all across, not just Africa, but Asia and other parts. I think we talked to him about like the Middle East as well. And they're constantly doing this all over the world. Abortion, contraception, immoral sexual training for young adults and teenagers, those kinds of things. For a decade, nobody's listened. And here we are now. There's a guy named Mike Benz, who is a journalist, executive director at FFO Freedom, the former State Department cyber, author of Unpunishable Monstrosity, Weapons of Mass Deletion. This guy's been posting all kinds of information on his X feed about how USAID has nefariously been a part of CIA operations in foreign lands, like Ukraine, for instance, talking about the overthrow of the Ukrainian government. What was that, 2014 when that coup happened?
Right.
And then the USAID issuing a memo telling what the new president can and cannot do on behalf of the United States government. Here's what you can and cannot do. And then funneling money to specific Dem pet project causes. It seems like it's not just Lepanto Institute, but a lot of other people are now asking big questions. Is USAID a front of the CIA? That's kind of a big deal, especially if you think about how the United States government has been exporting its abortion pro-death agenda around the world to our tax dollars.
Joe, this is all incredibly sad. And I think it's funny when our colleagues on the left jump up and down and say Russian collusion, Russia trying to involve itself in American elections, as if the United States has not involved itself in every election across the globe in the last 30 years. This is pure insanity, Joe. And to your point, we destabilized Ukraine to get a regime in Ukraine that we thought was going to be more friendly to the United States. Whether they are or not is questionable. They're certainly friendly to us when they need our money, right? The billions and billions and billions that we have channeled over there.
Which, by the way, did you see that Zelensky over the weekend said he doesn't know where all that money has gone? He hasn't received it all, he said.
Of course,
I have no idea
doesn't.
where the rest of it went.
Of course he doesn't. Russia is a corrupt government. We know that. You know who's more corrupt? Ukraine. Ukraine was even further down the corruption list than Russia was. So if
That's
Russia,
right.
and I don't remember the numbers, Joe, but if Russia was 175, Ukraine was 212 or whatever the numbers were. It was ridiculous. Yeah. But this is no different than those Ethiopian strongmen who seized the rice. These guys seize the money, and then the money goes into their numbered Swiss bank accounts to be untouchable by the people because you can't get it out without the number. And this is what's been going on with our money, our tax dollars that are getting sent to these overseas countries. We are paying off these leaders, these very incredibly corrupt leaders, to perform abortions on little girls, to destroy womanhood, to destroy babies, and to basically just destroy their own people. And I don't get it, Joe. This should be something that's bipartisan. End it now. It's dumb, it's bad, it's evil, it's wicked. And as you said earlier, our friend Michael Hitchborn has done such a good job for over a decade on exposing these scams. And Michael Benz on X, everyone should be following him because he's just asking the questions we're all asking.
What I find interesting is the headline that sort of broke all this was about Elon Musk trying to get and the Doge department trying to get access to the records at USAID, and they were classified. I'm sorry. Why would an organization who's supposed to be giving out federal tax dollars from its citizens to help, feed people, clothe people, that kind of thing? Why is there classified information on the back end? Why is that?
Well, Joe, now I know you're being facetious because you and I both know this is funneling money into covert operations to destabilize governments around the world. And yes, we do it, and we do it all the time. We don't like this guy in Libya. We destabilize their government. And the next thing you know, you have pure anarchy, violent anarchy on the streets in Libya. And Navy SEALs get drugged through the streets, and we're embarrassed, and then we blame the evil, wicked, whatever. And it's all coming from covert operations. I'm not saying the CIA. It could be other agencies within the government. There are multiple intelligence agencies within the government. How do you end up with the nonsense we had in Afghanistan? We were supplying money to the Talibs until they were the bad guy. We support them. We called them the Mujahideen, and they were fighting the Russians. It's the same folks. They have fighting season. They come down out of the mountains, they fight, and they go back up in the mountains until they came into the power. And we said, oh, no, these are not good guys. Guess who's running Afghanistan today, Joe? The Talibs, right. The same guys we put in power to begin with. So this insanity, we destabilized the government in Chile. And then put our guy in until he wasn't our guy anymore. And then we wanted to put him in prison. We did this in Panama with Noriega until he wasn't our guy.
We may be doing it again in Panama soon, it looks like. We're about to get a Panama part 2, is what it looks like. I remember
craziness.
That.
And I was active duty during all this time. And guess where I was going? They didn't tell me what coast I was going to guard. I went guarded the coast of whatever country we were destabilizing at the time. It's crazy. Right. It's crazy. And, I watched this, and I go back to what I said a week ago on this show. I said, we really should be the shining beacon that everyone looks towards and said, that's what I want my country to look like. That's what we should be. We should be the model of Republican government who is free trade, who is selling their goods, no entangling alliances. We stop meddling in the Middle East. We stop meddling in Africa. We stop meddling in Europe. We stop meddling in Asia, and just stay out of everybody else's business and live our lives. And hopefully with that comes a mass conversion to the one true church and to Holy Mother Church. And Joe, you can't you can't focus on what's truly important, which is our immortal soul, when we are wasting American lives and American dollars in these countries that are going to do what they can do anyway. They just do. They don't care. And if they have to perform abortions to get that almighty dollar, they're going to do it. If they have to pump pornography into the Gaza, they'll do it. Whatever it takes to get those U.S. dollars. Joe, why is it that an American iron worker has to give up 25% of his salary to support these people? And that's the bottom line. And this is why Donald Trump, one of the many reasons why Donald Trump won the last election, because he understands that you and I don't like this, Joe, and nobody in the media is.
If the American taxpayer decides, hey, we want some accountability where our money is going and what it's going for, who are they to say, no, you can't have access to better understand how this money is being spent? I mean, shut it down. If that's your answer, then of course your entire organization must be ended today. But Amen. If you want to cooperate, maybe we can find a way to keep going. Who knows? But because they're choosing, obviously, the hard road, well, then I think they get what they get, and I'm not going to feel sorry for them in the least. But Michael Hitchborn from Lepanto, who we're going to get on this week to talk about this, he's wondering whether or not CRS, who's gotten drunk off the millions and millions of dollars that USAID has given them over the years to support with abortion and contraception and this sexual perversion training for young people, especially women in Africa and other parts of the world, whether or not they will be able to get over USAID and the cash cow ending very soon. We'll have to have that conversation sometime this week. Michael Koeniger, God bless you, my brother. Thanks for hanging out. It was a good time last year hanging out. We got to do that again soon. But coming up after the break, let's talk about Fratelli Tutti. That's going to be very interesting. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. Ground News reports senior USAID security officials put on leave after refusing Musk's Doge access to agency systems. 2 senior USAID officials were placed on leave for refusing to share classified information with members of the Department of Government Efficiency who lacked security clearance, as reported by Reuters and Associated Press. Matt Hobson, the chief of staff at USAID, resigned amid ongoing personnel changes due to the disputes. The Department of Government Efficiency has reportedly been granted access to federal payment systems, raising concerns about oversight and spending, as noted by Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Epic Times reports Houston, New York flight safely aborted its takeoff. Passengers evacuated, the FAA says. United Airlines Flight 1382 was due to take off from Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport, just down the road from me, actually, but it safely aborted its takeoff over a reported engine issue around 8:30 a.m. local time. Passengers posted videos of the engine on fire and smoking, raising concerns. The plane, an Airbus A319, was scheduled to fly to New York City's LaGuardia Airport. The passengers on board were removed from the plane and sent to a nearby terminal, the agency added. It's now investigating the matter. However, Fox 29 reports the Philly plane crash update. Victims identified. Investigation continues. 6 people, including a pediatric patient, her mother, and 4 crew members, were killed when a Learjet en route to Missouri crashed along Cotman Avenue shortly after 6 p.m. in Philadelphia on Friday. A 7th victim, a person inside a vehicle near the crash, was announced by Mayor Parker during a press conference on Sunday as having died as a result of the accident. Their identity has not yet been released. On Sunday, the mayor increased the number of injured victims to 22 people. 5 of those victims remain hospitalized, with 3 in critical condition. The crash is being investigated by the NTSB, who are currently assessing debris from the site and evaluating the plane's black box for further information. Let's keep them in our prayers. Boy, this rash of aviation accidents is terrible. We'll have to cover more of that this week. Those are your headline news. Coming up tomorrow, there is an anniversary of Pope Francis's document on human fraternity, for world peace and living together, published back in 2019 on February the 4th. All of this as Pope Francis recently met once again with Buddhist monks from the Shaolin Temple, which is I don't have a problem with him meeting with monks, atheists, transgendered people, or anybody else, so long as he's trying to evangelize them for the glory of God and for their own salvation. I'm all right with it. But we wonder, based on human fraternity, whether or not those are, in fact, the motivations going on. Joining us now is Matt Gaspers to talk about it. Matt, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe. It's good to be back.
Remind us again, the document Human Fraternity. This is the document that Bishop Athanasius Schneider made a personal visit to Rome about, wasn't it?
That is correct. So in February of 2019, Pope Francis became the first Roman pontiff ever to travel to the Arabian Peninsula for some sort of interreligious, interfaith meeting with the Grand Imam. I think he is the head of a major Muslim university, Islamic university in Egypt, if I remember correctly. I forget his name. But he signed this document while he was there, the one that you just mentioned, and the document states, in part, quote, "Freedom is a right of every person. Each individual enjoys the freedom of belief, thought, expression, and action." And here's the controversial quote: "The pluralism and the diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and language are willed by God in his wisdom." So it doesn't say they are permitted by God. They are willed. That obviously implies positively willed by God in his wisdom, through which he created human beings. This divine wisdom is the source from which the right to freedom of belief and the freedom to be different derives. So the obvious problem with this statement is that God does not will false religions. He does positively will the other things mentioned, namely color, sex, race, and language. Those things are positively willed by God, the differences, I mean. But God certainly does not will false religions. There is one true faith, which he wills, which is Catholicism, Christianity.
Yeah.
So that's a major problem with this document.
Yeah, it's a major problem. But I think a lot of Catholics can't wrap their head around why it's a problem that we would want to live in peace with our neighbors who maybe aren't Christians, Catholic or otherwise. Why? I mean, there is something to that. Jesus speaks about in Matthew's Gospel. I'm thinking of chapter 6 in particular, Sermon on the Mount, to love our enemies, to live peaceably with our neighbors if we can. So why would there be issues with wanting to live in peace and harmony with our neighbors, no matter what their religion is? Matt Gaspers.
No, I think I certainly agree with that. And St. Paul says the same thing in his epistles. For example, in Romans 12, he talks about, as far as it is within your power, live in peace with all people. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. That's basically what he says. So that certainly is part of the faith, that we are to live in peace as far as it is possible on our part. But that doesn't include fudging on the truth. The truth of the faith is there is only, as St. Paul also says, one God, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, to whom all are called to convert and be baptized and enter into the one true church that Jesus Christ our Lord founded. And ultimately, as Pius XI says in Quas Primas, his great encyclical on the social kingship of Christ, that if men are sincere about living in peace, they must look for the peace of Christ in the kingdom of Christ, that there is no real peace without the Prince of Peace himself. And and this document completely fails to mention those truths.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say it's even more confusing than that in some ways. It says the first and most important aim of religions is to believe in God, to honor him, and to invite all men and women to believe that this universe depends on a God who governs it. He is the creator who has formed us with his divine wisdom and has granted us the gift of life to protect it. It is a gift that no one has the right to take away, threaten, or manipulate to suit oneself. I mean, it's subtle. It's subtle in its error, but it's a huge error nonetheless, in that God revealed himself to mankind through salvation history. And he made clear his plan for salvation of all souls through the one and only door to reach the Father, which is Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, and life, John chapter 14. So if me put it this way, Matt, if you had not known that Pope Francis had ever written this document, let's just say you came across this document and you didn't know who wrote this. There was no identity of the author. Would you have thought, oh, the Pope in the Vatican must have written this?
No, certainly not. I mean, it sounds basically like it was written by a Freemason. That it's naturalism. It's
absolutely bizarre. It's totally Twilight Zone if you really stop and think about it. Like, does the person who wrote this, do they believe that the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church is the sacrament of salvation on earth that God instituted? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. What say you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same. And really, it doesn't even require that anyone believe in any sort of revelation, let alone the actual true revelation of God given to us in and through his Son, Jesus Christ. And what really boggles my mind, Joe, is that there hasn't been more uproar about this over the past 6 years by members of the hierarchy. I mean, the only two that I know of for certain that come to mind who have said something about this are Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano and Bishop Athanasius Schneider, who you mentioned in the beginning. Actually, during one of the ad limina visits for the Kazakhstan bishops, brought it up. He broached the subject. But, it's never been the subject of an official dubia, as has content from Amoris Laetitia and other things back in more recently in 2023 with Cardinal Burke and some other cardinals, Cardinal Brandmuller. I forget the full list of them. But and what boggles my mind about it is that whereas those other things kind of are particular components of the Catholic faith, this statement in this document on human fraternity that God wills the plurality and the diversity of religions undermines the entire Catholic faith wholesale. So it's crazy to me that there hasn't been more uproar. And it also, something that got a lot of attention, and rightfully so, in October of 2019, we all remember the Pachamama incident. But that's a natural consequence of this kind of a document. When you say that the plurality and the pluralism and the diversity of religions are willed by God in his wisdom, why wouldn't there be a Pachamama incident? You know what I mean?
Right. And how dare we criticize it if, in fact, God wills the plurality of religions? If that's true, then why am I here? You know what I mean? Like, why are any of us here? It makes zero sense. The whole effort here is pointless, because if God wills that there's multiple pluralities of religion, then we are wasting everyone's time in the process. And the scriptures clearly aren't true.
And not only that, it really doesn't even matter if you hold to the Orthodox Catholic faith either. If God wills every religion, then really every expression of any religion is just as good as another. So who cares if you're receiving Holy Communion while living in adultery? If that's the best that you can do, I mean, that's essentially what Amoris Laetitia says. If that might be what God is asking of you. If that's the best that you can give, then you're doing okay. So, in my opinion, so many problems of the Francis pontificate are tied back to this, are really encapsulated in this statement that God wills the plurality or the pluralism and the diversity of religions.
Why do you think we are so inclined to just want to be secularists? Because that's really what we're talking about here. The human fraternity is about go along to get along. Everybody be happy with everybody else, no matter what. There's no consequence of choice or action or anything like that. And we're just really becoming secularists. Why are we so inclined to that?
I think secularists, leftists have a great difficulty distinguishing between hating the sin, and it is a sin to belong to a false religion. That's an objectively evil thing. And loving the sinner. They think that it's hateful to condemn false religions. They can't separate the religion itself from the people who practice it. So we're not saying when we condemn false religions, we're not condemning everybody who happens to belong to a false religion. That might be the only thing that they've ever known. That's what they were raised in, whatever. So it's not hateful to condemn evil and to condemn falsehoods. When our Lord, one thing I think about in regard to this document, I think about our Lord's conversation or his exchange with Pontius Pilate on the day of the crucifixion, where Pilate's questioning him, "Are you a king?" And our Lord says, "For this reason I was born, for this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth." And our Lord says, "Those who are of the truth hear my voice." So there is objective truth. Those who are of the truth hear the voice of Christ and embrace it. So, it's not hateful to draw a line in the sand and say you're either with Christ or you're against him, and we call you to be with him because God wants all to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth, as St. Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter 2.
And I think that gets to the crux of why I think the human fraternity document is so incredibly dangerous, in that if in fact God wills the multiplicity of the all of these different religions, if God wills that, then we are not just in error, but we're actually doing a great harm to the world by calling them to conversion. But if the document is wrong and the original mission of Christ is right, Matthew chapter 28, make disciples of all nations, go and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Golly gee whiz, then if we fail to do that and we listen to what this document seems to suggest, then are we going to be held accountable for that at our own judgments? We don't know when our judgment will come, or the end of the world may come. I mean, planes are crashing right now. You never know if you're going to survive the day, let alone get to the end of time. So, but either way, all give an account and nobody gets away with it. 100% of everybody will be held accountable for every single word uttered and action committed. So I want to talk more about that with Matt Gaspers and human fraternity on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere, but share us with a friend. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Can I just give a shout out to my phone company, my cell phone company? Do you give shout outs to your cell phone company during the day? You should. And if you're not, maybe it's because you got the wrong cell phone company. Just wondering. But iCatholicMobile.com, they, like me, believe there's no salvation outside of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Does yours? Mine does. Praise be to God. We're on the team. We love it. You can find more information. Yeah, they've got unlimited text and talk, and they've got, the fast, easy, secure data network in the country. That's all well and good. They also have the Purity browser, which they're offering great deals on to help keep the smut out of your house so your kids' souls aren't going to, be in jeopardy. So it's a great organization. They support what we do. They're sponsors of us here at iCatholic Radio, and we love them for it. iCatholicMobile.com. You can find more information there. We're having a conversation with Matt Gaspers about the anniversary that's coming up tomorrow on the document on human dignity, which also relates to Fratelli Tutti as well. But Matt Gaspers is joining us. Matt, welcome back. The document also says, we affirm also the importance of awakening religious awareness and the need to revive this awareness in the hearts of new generations through sound education and an adherence to moral values and upright religious teachings. I have to say that when I think about this, it's that old dilemma. Was Jesus, was he God? Was he a good teacher? You know what I mean? Like this dilemma people have asked themselves now for so many years. Jesus wasn't a good man. Jesus wasn't a good teacher. Jesus was God incarnate. I mean, the weight of his proclamation should shake your soul. I mean, just today in the gospel, in the Novus Ordo Missae, is the Garician. And when after the townspeople show up and they see this guy freed, which is a miracle because he's been tormenting them all, Jesus frees them of these demons that were harassing them, and they still want him to leave. This document doesn't say Jesus is the only way towards salvation. This document says upright religious teachings of, whatever goodness that you want to. It's just it's so gobbledygook, right? It's just mush. There's no real truth and meat on the bone there, which is reminding me of one of the oldest fragments known to exist of the Gospels is from the Gospel of John. It's Pontius Pilate, which you brought up in the last segment. What is truth? It's just a fragment. That's all it says. What is truth? It seems like the person who wrote this document, and I don't think it was Pope Francis who wrote it, somebody else, but he signed it and he published it, so his name's on it. I wonder if they know who truth is. Do you?
Something else that I think we definitely need to wrestle with, which I've done in an article in 2023 in the context of that Abrahamic family house, the interreligious complex that was built in Abu Dhabi in honor of this document. So Pope Francis, the day after he signed it, he was flying back to Rome, and as usual, he gave one of his in-flight press conferences, and this is what he had to say when someone asked about the document. He said, "I openly reaffirm this. From the Catholic point of view, the document does not move 1 millimeter away from the Second Vatican Council. It is even cited several times." Now that he is mistaken about. The documents of the Second Vatican Council are not cited, but there is a lot of overlap between them, two in particular, as I demonstrate in this article of mine. But he goes on to say the document was crafted in the spirit of the Second Vatican Council, and that certainly is true. If someone feels uncomfortable, I understand this. It is not a daily occurrence, and it is not a step backward. It is a step forward, but one that comes after 50 years from the council, which must be developed. Historians say that a council to sink its roots in the church, it takes 100 years. We are halfway there. So the point of my article that I wrote in 2023 is basically to demonstrate that this, as I say, while the document on human fraternity does not actually cite the council, Francis is mistaken about that, it clearly shares common grounds with conciliar themes and texts, in particular Nostra Aetate, the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions, and Dignitatis Humanae, which is the Declaration on Religious Freedom. And this is also brought up, you mentioned Fratelli Tutti. Pope Francis, again, he actually quotes from Vatican II, saying, this is paragraph 277, he says, "The Church esteems the ways in which God works in other religions and, quote, rejects nothing of what is true and holy in these religions." This is from Nostra Aetate. "She has a high regard for their manner of life and conduct, their precepts and doctrines, which often reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men and women." Well, first of all, the Church has never held in high regard and esteem the demonic religion of Islam, which is blasphemous and false on many accounts. So that's just an outrageous thing to claim, not to mention the other false religions of the world. But in this same paragraph, 277, Fratelli Tutti, he goes on to say, "Others drink from other sources. For us, the wellspring of human dignity and fraternity is the gospel of Jesus Christ." Well, it's not just for us, it's for everyone, objectively. As you mentioned, what is truth? Well, ultimately, truth is a person, a divine person, who took flesh, and his name is Jesus Christ. So this is complete relativism. It's religious indifferentism is essentially what it is, which was condemned by the popes prior to Vatican II for about 150 years prior to the council.
I think a lot of Catholics are kind of weary in this pontificate, even Catholics who maybe haven't been as outspoken as you or I or others have been on this pontificate over the last 14 plus years now. But I think that most Catholics are just kind of weary of it all. The constant scandals, the constant controversies. Do you think the next pontificate, let's just say, let's hypothetical, best case scenario, we get a good man in the chair of St. Peter. Would we be seeing a council of bishops, a synod possibly, that might overturn some of the things from the Francis pontificate? I would have to imagine that this document on human fraternity would have to be one of those that would have to be overturned and then, cast out, so to speak, from the archive. How would that work?
Well, I mean, the best historical precedent I suppose we have is the case of Pope Honorius I back in I think he reigned in the early 600s. I forget the exact dates of his reign, but roughly 40 years, I think it was, after his death, 40 to 50 years, he was posthumously condemned by one of his successors. I mean, he was condemned explicitly by an ecumenical council. I think it was the second or third council of Constantinople. I have written about this. I just can't remember the dates offhand. But then one of his successors posthumously condemned him, anathematized him, and, reiterated the truth that Honorius had failed to uphold. That this was all in the context of the Monothelites heresy, I believe is how you pronounce it, where there was a group saying that Christ only had one will, that the divine will basically overrode or kind of absorbed his human will from his human soul. And whereas the truth is that Christ is fully God and fully man in every sense of the word. So he has, the divine will in common with God the Father and God the Holy Spirit, but he also has his human will, which he fully consciously subjected to the divine will and everything. For example, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he said, Father, if it be possible, let this chalice of suffering, my passion, pass away from me, and that I don't have to go through it, speaking from his humanity. But he said, not my will, but thy will be done. So he's clearly subjecting his human will to the divine will. So it is possible for a pope to be posthumously condemned, and I think it's very likely that that's what we'll see with Pope Francis. I mean, something has to be done about these objective heresies that he has propagated throughout his pontificate.
Matt Gaspers, that music means we're out of time. Could you send me the link to the article you referenced that you wrote? I want to include that in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We'll put the show notes up here shortly. We're going to continue our conversation. Matt, if you can continue to hang out with us, we'd love to have you in the after show where we're going to get your opinion directly. You can be a part of that conversation. Let us know what you think one way or the other in one of the live video feeds. You can find them linked up at thestationofthecross.com/ACT or on our iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can download it for free and be on the team today on your iOS or Android app store. We'll see you right back here tomorrow morning, if you can't, with another round of A Catholic Take. Until then, God love
you. We hear all the time from listeners who discovered the station by seeing a Try God bumper magnet in traffic. You can request a free bumper magnet and start evangelizing just by driving around town. Go to thestationofthecross.com and click on Promotional Material under the About tab. There, you can request a magnet for your listening area. We even have one for the iCatholic Radio mobile app. Request yours today.
And we're back. Welcome to the Aftershow, everyone. Happy Monday.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Praise be to God. I almost fainted during the gospel. I was getting very close to it, to be honest with you.
Joe, do you mind taking the screen share down?
No, I will never, under any circumstances.
Well, then I'm just going to have to cut you off and just put Matt on screen.
It's tough being the producer. He's really this wizard behind the curtain. Okay. Now everybody knows the real Jack Burton. I was having another fainting spell today during the show, but by the grace of God, we were able to avoid it. It's a weird circumstance, but it's still happening. Mateus, good morning to you from sunny California, complaining about Telegram as usual. I don't know why.
Those entitled Californians.
Exactly. Go eat your grass and drink your latte,
avocado.
Mateus. Your avocado.
Overpriced avocado.
I like avocados.
Someone said we should go back to calling them alligator pears. I like that idea. Like,
alligator
remember
pears?
when we stopped calling them French fries and we called them freedom fries? We should go back to calling them alligator pears.
I remember what? Why did we call them freedom fries again?
I think because the French didn't want to join our invasion of countries that we had no right to be in, or something like that.
Was that it? Okay. Hey, Chesty, I'm seeing you in the chat box, brother. How are you? People have been very concerned about you, Chesty. How are you, my friend? Forget about me. How are you? Hopefully you're doing well. It's good to see you back in the chat box. Lights, I see you there. Colleen, Miriam, Stephen S., thank you for your prayers. I do appreciate it. Kilroy Jones, good morning to you. KSB, I'm still jokingly call them freedom fries. I forgot about the freedom fries thing. You're doing well, Chesty. That's good. Praise be to God. Mr. Wonderful is here. Might be a panic attack. Breathe deep. I do have to breathe deep in order to avoid it, but it's very convoluted and complex the way it all works. But the bottom line is it's all about what I'm thinking in my head. It's thoughts that can trigger those things. And it's an otherworldliness. The best way I describe it is I have deja vu of dreams, but like they're the kind of dreams that you have when you have a fever. So if you ever have a fever, you have wacky dreams. It's like having deja vu of those kinds of dreams. And then there's the physicality of the fainting thing is connected to those thoughts. So when I have those thoughts, it starts the chain reaction. And then all of a sudden I'm there. So I have to my head starts to go crazy, and I have to pray and breathe through it. But I was reading the gospel when it was going through that today. So the show must go on under every circumstance. If I were to die today, it's kind of like the Holy Mass. No matter what's happening, Father has to continue. Okay? No exceptions. Father's got to keep going.
The question is, Joe, do you want me to keep you on screen and just and do an impression of your voice, or do you want me to just take over completely? That's the issue.
That's right. Show must go on, Jake. You hear me? Don't stop and call 911. I don't want none of that nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
You continue the show.
We can call in the after show because it's more casual. Then we can call 911.
Just keep me on drooling.
We'll put the insiders on the line.
It's terrible. So anyway, whatever. Damon, good morning to you. Paul, good morning. Janice, I appreciate your prayers. Thank you. Praise be to God. I'll be all right. Everything's going to be fine. Good morning to you. Trad Jack Burton, Tweet and Toe. Pedro, good morning. Mimigo. Jane, good morning to you. Like Alex Jones said, he isn't the only one. I wonder how many Catholic voices will be on the list. FBI, bingo. Well, in other words, it's coming out that I guess Alex was on a terrorist list or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure some Catholics are as well. I wouldn't doubt that in the least. Gus, good morning, Gus. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Praise be to God. Thanks for doing it. Mike K, of course, on the team today. Lots of conversation over the weekend. James 16897. Good morning to you from Romania. I guess it's in your case afternoon. A lot of conversation over the weekend about the airplane craze thing. Like what is going on with airplanes these days? Hey, Rob. Good morning to you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we were kind of seeing that foreshadowed with all the less destructive incidents. Remember the past year or two? We've been seeing all these, runway errors, planes almost crashing. I feel like it's just the natural consequence of the uptick in incidents that were being reported. All the Boeing stuff, that's what it seems like to me. It seems like the natural consequence of what's been being foreshadowed by all those other reports. But who knows? I mean, there's always the potential of there being more nefarious.
I do know that the jab mandate meant a lot of people who worked for airlines no longer work for airlines.
The jab mandate, DEI requirements, everything. It's been I think we're starting to see the really truly disastrous results of the competency crisis. I think that's the real problem.
Yeah. Eric Powell, good morning to you. Jeff Horn, good morning to you. He said you're on the list. It must be doing something right. Low Key, good morning to you. Little Daisy is back. Good morning and God bless. It's a great time to be Catholic. Love your witness to truth. Yay and amen, Little Daisy. I'm glad you're here. Angie, good morning to you. Debbie Furtado from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Good morning. Praise be to God. Hey, Debbie, do you guys get like fresh fish there in New Bedford? You probably got the best fresh seafood ever. I should fly my wife up there just to get some. She'd love it. Ginger, it's Ginger Grandma, right? Isn't that right? I haven't seen you in a while. I'm glad you're back. Thanks for hanging out. I'm here, but was watching in bed, talking about dreams. My dad was a preacher, and every year the church would show a film about hell. I lost the dream after becoming Catholic. Oh, well, I'm glad you're in the team. I'm glad you're on the team. Praise be to God. Jupiter NP from Florida. Good morning, Yvonne. Good morning, Christina OFS. Good morning to you from sunny New Hampshire. Amanda Burrito Bees. It was like 75 degrees yesterday. It was like 17 in New Hampshire, and I think in Gilmanton where we used to live. So quite a bit of difference. Eric says, brain drain mandates the best retired or left. Yep. It is concerning, though. It is concerning to see the state of here's a question, though, and Matt, feel free to chime in. I want to get back to some of the Pope Francis stuff here in a second, but is it a case, my kids asked this question, is there really a problem with airlines? Is it dangerous to fly right now? My answer was no, I don't think it's all that dangerous to fly. Not really. But you never know. You have to always be prepared to meet your maker. Mm-hmm. Live in a state of grace and then don't be stressed about it. Pray, hope, and don't worry, as St. Padre Pio would say. But I think there's a hyper awareness and a hypersensitivity given how, I mean, Matt, I might be older than you. I think we're close in age. But when we were kids, a plane would fall from the sky once a year. You know what I mean? Like there'd be some major airline incident somewhere on planet Earth once a year and 400 people were dead as a result to it. Like, but that doesn't happen anymore. Even with these incidents, it's still fairly rare and mostly safe. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, I think this recent tragedy with the helicopter flying into the plane, and I still can't get over. Every time I see the footage of it, I'm just thinking to myself, how in the world did no one on that helicopter see that plane that was lit up like a Christmas tree? That just seems incredible to me. How is that even possible? Now, I know nothing about flying an airplane. I know nothing about flying a helicopter, but just common sense, as President Trump has said, like if you're at the exact same altitude, which is what he reiterated in the press conference several times, and other people confirmed it, how can you not see this bright light directly in front of you? I don't understand how that's possible, but
it's weird, isn't it? Now, I watched one pilot talk about it, and he said his opinion was, especially now that Pete Hegseth has confirmed that they were using night vision goggles, that they're like looking through cans. And so they might not have had like the wider field of view that you might remember from watching certain Navy SEAL movies and all of that. They might have just been looking at two cans, which gives them a very, very narrow field of view. And this pilot suggested that they were looking down the line of the approach towards that runway. So there was a bunch of airplanes all in a line headed towards the airport, waiting their turn to make their landing. And it's very likely they were looking, because of the limited nature of their cans, they were looking past the plane in front of them and seeing one further in line. So when the tower says, "Do you see it?" Yes, we see it. But they probably didn't see the one closest to them. They saw the one further down. And what's interesting is twice the tower say, "Hey, you got traffic. Are you watching?" And they're like, "Yes." And then they say, "We request visual separation." The helicopter pilot did. "We request visual separation." And this pilot said, when you request visual separation and the tower says okay or agreed, you are now completely responsible for what happens next, because you're saying, "I've got this. I'm in control. Let me manage it." And the tower's like, "Okay, you got it." They said that twice before they impacted that plane. So clearly, if that's true, then the Black Hawk is most definitely responsible for this. I think it's obvious that everybody believes that. But my point is, did they not see it? Did they see it? Either way, no matter what, nefarious or otherwise, they definitely are responsible for that terrible tragedy, that accident, which is mind-boggling. And there's so many questions. Are we ever going to know? Who knows? I don't know. I mean, like, it seems like we ask these questions, and nobody ever gets answers.
Seems to be a lot of questions surrounding the pilot, who I guess her name was released in the last couple of days, Rebecca Lobach, who
I don't think she was the pilot. I think she was the co-pilot.
Oh, she wasn't?
I don't know this for sure, but like when you go back and you listen to the recording of the radio exchange between Tower and the Black Hawk, you don't ever hear her voice. It's always a male's voice who is speaking to the tower and requesting visual separation. So my guess is they're just highlighting her because she's a woman. That's my take, is that they're highlighting her because she's a woman, and it's such a tragedy to lose a female pilot. Listen, I mourn for her soul. Don't get me wrong, but I don't like, who is the guy that spoke? Because it wasn't her. She didn't speak. So who's the other guy? I have to go back and look it up.
That's an important thing, because there are some people on social media who are basically, wholesale blaming her for everything. And so that's important to know, if it was a male speaking in that exchange, then obviously it wasn't her.
I don't think it was her. So I guess we'll find out. But ultimately, I'm getting ready to get on an airplane in May to go to Greece with Bishop Strickland and Turkey. I'm not worried about it. God's will be done. I've flown many times. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds like that'll be a great trip.
It's going to be an exciting trip, to say the least. Mateus says, I agree, Joe, with you and Matt regarding female pilot. I just think that they're trying to make hay out of the fact that she was a female and she used to work for the Biden administration in some capacity. I don't even know. But I think it's beside the point. That's just politics. In Proximus, good morning. Christine OFS, good morning again. Amanda was here. Good morning, Amanda. Said to say hello to Matt. Praise be to God. Eric again, praise Jesus. Great conversation. Linda and Wheeler, they can control vehicles remotely now. Yes, they can. That's true. It's true. They can do that. But they've been able to do that for a long time. I remember as a kid watching videos of them crashing airplanes in the desert to do testing to see how dummies would react to the crash. That was all remotely controlled. So they've been able to control airplanes, no matter the size, for a very long time. Jane says, I just heard Hall's cough drops help with panic attacks because it helps open the nasal passages. Try a cough drop. I might. We'll have to see. I don't think of them as panic attacks, just so you know. I don't feel panicky when that's happening to me. I have a friend who suggested the same thing because he had panic attacks, and I don't know that they're the same thing because and panic is not one of the things that's going on with me. I don't feel panicky in any way, shape, or form. It's not. There's no anxiety related to it when it's happening. It's really all just in the head, literally. Jane also says, "What a pope! Didn't you say allows like the demon on the chain? Allows is not wills, correct?" Yeah. So maybe Matt, you can give us the distinctions between God wills or God allows, as in relation to the document on human fraternity.
My understanding, and I think this is what Bishop Athanasius Schneider brought up when he met with Pope Francis. I forget exactly when that was, if it was later in 2019 or, it must have been because he wouldn't have been able to travel in 2020. It was I think it was in March of 2019, if I remember correctly. So the Kazakhstan bishops visited Rome for their ad limina visit, their regular every 5 years or whatever it is with Pope Francis. And Bishop Schneider broached the subject of the human fraternity document, which just days after it was made public, he issued a very strong statement against it. So he urged Pope Francis he urged him ultimately to retract the document, entirely. But if he wouldn't do that, he at least said the Pope needs to make it clear that, other religions exist in the world as part of God's permissive will, like he allows it in the same way that God allowed Adam and Eve to exercise their free will and to sin, and he allows us to do the same. It doesn't mean that he positively wants that to happen. That's the difference.
Yeah, God's not going to make slaves
the difference
out of us.
between God allows certain things because he can bring greater good out of anything, but that doesn't mean he positively wills evil and sin to happen. I hope that makes it clear.
Yeah. Free will. It's tough. Free will can be tough. It's one of the ways I've always talked about that is to point out why is it that if I were going to create the universe, Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, would I have put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in their midst? Why did God put a tree that they're not allowed to eat from in their midst? It's because of free will. Why does God create hell? God created hell to respect your free will, right? He gives you these boundaries and you have free will to break those boundaries or not. That's all on you. They come with consequences. Something we've talked quite a bit about in our ongoing Wednesday night Bible study, which, by the way, we're going to get into session 12 tonight, or not tonight, Wednesday night, session 12, where we're going to, start to tie together this typology in the Old Testament, where you have all these covenants with their curses and blessings. I mean, Moses did it. Joshua did it. Warning, hey, this is the covenant. Here's what happens when you keep it. Here's what happens when you don't. And you knuckleheads, you and I both know you're not going to keep it, so enjoy your consequences, you dirty. And then anyway, I digress. So it's like one after another. Sinai, Moab. The cycle rinses and repeats. And we're here today with the remnant of those people still being hard-hearted. Pray for their conversion. Because at some point, God will bring about a conversion in what's left of them. But unfortunately, it will be after the great persecution of the Antichrist. And that's a horrible thing because many people die. And when you die, if you're not in a state of grace, you don't go to heaven, period. It's just because God's going to respect your choices. God's going to say, hey, if you don't want to be with me, fine. You don't have to be. I've created a place just for people just like that, and you will go there.
Yeah, there's regarding the choice thing, I think some people might not realize that, like, even the angels, when the angels fell, they fell because of a choice they made in full knowledge of the results.
Right.
And they, they would not, if given the chance, it's impossible for them to be given the chance because of how God decided it, but if given the chance, they would choose the same thing again. Like the fallen angels knew exactly what they were in for, and they still made that choice anyway. And that's, I believe it's been stated that that's what the souls in hell do, is that they, like, even if given the chance, they would not,
they wouldn't choose
they would not choose differently. They're there permanently from their own choice. They have chosen.
Could you imagine? Can you imagine?
Like it's a scary thought.
Because I think, and that's ultimately rooted in pride, that they don't want to admit that they were wrong. It's something like that. I don't know.
Probably,
that's my.
Have you been talking to my wife again? Has she been telling you stories about me? Because, and that was like verbatim, quote unquote, something about my wife.
Did you see that Master and Commander quote joke I put in the Telegram group, Joe?
I did. What? Say it again.
Where it's the line from Master and Commander where Captain Aubrey is saying, that this is a ship of the King's Navy, and I will grind whatever grist is required to fulfill the mission or whatever.
Right.
Regardless of the cost. Yes, regardless of the cost. And that's and then someone said me when my wife is urging me to go to the doctor.
That's right. Exactly. My favorite joke from the Master and Commander is the lesser of two evils line in there, where they were having dinner and there's little worms.
I'm so disappointed because I couldn't find any weevils for my little Master and Commander movie night I had last week. Couldn't find any weevils.
Oh, Master, that's a great movie, man. I love that movie. It's such a good movie. Hey, I can never remember how to say your name.
Isn't it Goagensa or Goagensa?
Goagensa 61. I'm sorry. You deserve your name being said correctly, but I am not a smart man, as Forrest Gump once said. People are saying that the family deleted all her social media, and that makes it suspect. Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, I guess my point is, even if that's true, Jake almost got it. Jake, you're close. Almost got it. But, I guess one of the points I was watching Michael Knowles talk about this incident last week, and I kind of agree with him. We don't need to believe that there's a conspiracy after every event. Like, life just happens. Bad things happen in life. Accidents happen. People get lazy and complacent. People make mistakes. And when people make mistakes, bad things happen, especially around things like aircraft or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily need to believe a conspiracy theory to get to the point that 67 people died needlessly. Or why did this plane crash in Philadelphia? It stalled somehow, but it looks like its engine was on fire at the time. So what happened? Hopefully we'll find out. My problem is, it's like the drones, right? Like, so take the drones in New Jersey, for example. When Biden was president, everyone in his government told us they had no idea what these were. Trump's in office, first press secretary event, and she's like, oh, yeah, these were FAA approved. It's like, listen, you might say, okay, let's just say, because we weren't told, Donald Trump has not told us what they were doing. He just told me that the government knew that they were doing it. So I want to know, okay, fine, what were they doing? Maybe it's classified. But so say that, right? Like, that's the problem I have with some of these incidents is, like, they're like the Las Vegas shooting, for instance, which is now gone into the ether. Nobody ever talks about it. They don't even hold memorials in Las Vegas for that event every year. Like, oh, it's been dismissed. It's been whatever. There's too many other questions that need to be answered. Just answer them. Just come out and answer them. Don't deny them. Don't pretend like they don't exist. Don't avoid them. Just hit them straight on. Give solid answers to them. And we can all just move on. But the problem is they never do that. And that perpetuates all the conspiracies. So I don't think everything is a conspiracy. But at the same time, some conspiracies are true. This is what it is.
I think if there was any quote unquote conspiracy, and I'm using that word very loosely, I think, as President Trump mentioned during the press conference, it could very well be that DEI policies led to this tragedy, or it's possible. I mean, obviously, either someone on that helicopter or someone on the ground or someone in the airplane, someone didn't know what they were supposed to know and didn't do what they were supposed to do for whatever reason.
Or someone in air traffic control, right? They were saying that they were short-staffed there. And the short staffing issue like is, that. I mean, there's been some great threads breaking this down, and this was being put out there well before this accident happened. This was being pointed at in certain articles is that the air traffic control completely ruined their testing process, their application and hiring process, because basically the Obama administration came in and said the ATC staff is too white. That's basically what they said. It's not diverse enough, so we're going to do a test, and the test actually prioritized people who had no experience, because the way the test could racially discriminate without appearing to racially discriminate, so they can get around the legal problems with that, is that it would prioritize factors that were highly correlated with people who were more diverse, so to speak. So if you didn't have previous employment in air traffic control or aviation industry or whatever, you were more likely to get the job in air traffic control. It's literally prioritizing people who are less qualified out of an assumption that means they're more diverse, so we can diversify the workforce. It's like,
which is problematic.
You're doing that, and then you're like, oh, why are plane crashes increasing?
However, let me push back, and I'm going to assume that what you said was true. Okay,
yes.
Let's just assume that's the way it went down.
Yeah,
fine,
fair
enough.
There's documents about it. Yeah,
fine, fair enough. But was there anything about what the air traffic controller did that night that would suggest that he didn't do his job well?
That's all. I don't know the details of the. I'm just bringing this up.
He kept alerting them. Hey, do you see that aircraft? Do you see? You guys are getting close. I'm like, it sounded to me like he did his job.
Well, that's good. I'm just saying that the last thing I heard about it was that they were short staffed that night.
I think they are.
I'm not saying that he didn't do his job. I'm just saying that this is one of the factors that needs to be considered in any of these incidents. Not just the pilots, but also air traffic control, because that is.
I remember a few years ago, there was an effort in our homeschooling group to recruit air traffic control candidates because there was a giant need. And this might be, I don't even know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. I can't remember how many years ago this was, but this was a handful of years ago. And there was an effort to say, hey, we really need air traffic controllers. Why not try out? Why not apply? It's got a great, financial package for the future, blah, 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 blah. I remember talking to my oldest son about it. I'm like, hey, this, who knows? You might consider that. So it sounds like they've had a short staff for a long time. And it also sounds like you get Biden administration in there, and you just further fanning the flame of all this DEI woke stuff. And it's a bad recipe. It's got to be incredibly stressful to manage all these aircraft and all the moving parts on the air and ground, and then you compound that with the DEI, and it's just a bad deal. But
that was a plot point in Breaking Bad, 15, 20 years ago now. There was a Breaking Bad season where a major plot point was an accident caused by an overstressed air traffic controller messing up his job because he was completely overstressed by the death of his daughter. It does sound to me that when I listened to this air traffic controller at Reagan, it sounded like he was doing his job. Yeah, so I'm not saying he wasn't. I was just mentioning this as something to consider in general, because if we're looking at it, we have to take ATC into account as well as the piloting. There's so many moving parts to this. You have to take them all into account.
It is. I do find it weird though isn't part of air traffic control controlling the altitude of each aircraft?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he say you guys need to go down or up or something?
Because the Black Hawk pilot, which was a male voice, not a female's voice, said request visual separation. That literally means we want to be in charge. We want to be able to manage this because we're seeing it firsthand. And you have to ask ATC for permission. ATC agreed to it. And so they were going about it. And then as they got closer, the ATC guy came back on and said, hold on, do you guys see that aircraft, right? Because it's getting awfully close. I'm paraphrasing. And the Black Hawk pilot again said, yes, request visual separation. And so twice the Black Hawk helicopter pilot said, hey, we got this. We're in charge. We take responsibility. That's a big deal. Yeah. So, I think the ATC guy did his job, no matter what stress or what other circumstances are at play here. I just think the Black Hawk team failed to see their targets. They were told by the ATC to fly around the backside of this aircraft. They either didn't see or intentionally didn't see. We don't know. We don't know what the deal is, but for one reason or another, that Black Hawk is responsible, in my humble opinion, for this incident, and it could be avoided. Now, why anybody, because the other problem is the Black Hawk team had to talk to two different air traffic control towers. They've got the military one they have to talk to, and they have the civilian one they got to talk to. So that leaves even more stress and more complexity to the problem. But who in the government thought it was a great idea to fly military helicopters down a route of oncoming civilian aircraft on landing approach? Listen, I'm not a genius. As the great philosopher Forrest Gump once said, I'm not a smart man, but I tell you what, I did stay at a Holiday Inn once, and you'd know better than to fly into oncoming civilian traffic. Seems dumb in my book, but nobody asked for my opinion. Colleen,
towards the end of our radio. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You first.
I was just going to say, towards the end of our radio segment, I was trying to remember, we were talking about, what can be done about Pope Francis, his pontificate, even maybe after he's gone. So I couldn't remember the exact dates of Pope Honorius reigned. He's the only pope in history that I'm aware of who's been posthumously anathematized. He reigned from 625 to 638. And it was Pope St. Leo II, who reigned from 682 to 683, who confirmed the condemnation of his condemnation by the Third Council of Constantinople, which happened in 681. So here's what the Third Council of Constantinople said regarding Pope Honorius. We have also seen fit to banish from the Holy Church of God and to anathematize also Honorius, the former Pope of the Elder Rome, because we have discovered in the letters written by him to Sergius that he followed in everything the opinion of that one and confirmed his impious dogma. Sergius, I believe, was the Patriarch of Constantinople who was leaning towards the heresy that Christ only had one will, the divine will. And then St. Leo II confirmed this condemnation with this language. He said, "And we in like manner anathematize the inventors of the new error, namely Theodore, Bishop of Ferran, Cyrus of Alexandria, Sergius, Pyrrhus, and also Honorius, who did not purify this apostolic church by the doctrine of the apostolic tradition, but rather attempted to subvert the immaculate faith by profane treason." So I could certainly see in the future a future pope saying something similar to that about Pope Francis, although Francis has actively propagated heresies, so it might even have to take it a little further than that language.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting if that does happen. And I have to believe that if we get a decent pope in the next conclave, and I'm not praying for Francis's death, trust me, I'm not. I'm praying for Francis because you don't want him to die too soon. You know what I'm saying? Whoever we get, if we got a decent one that would have the courage to call bishops together to even evaluate this, think about that. They'd have to admit publicly that, it's kind of like the Joe Biden dementia thing. Like, who knew exactly in his staff that he was not capable of being in charge of nuclear arsenal? And why didn't they say so first? It's similar in that regard. How many bishops, cardinals, or whatever are going to have to admit publicly, we knew that these documents were incredibly troubling, but we didn't want to admit it out loud. We'll have to deal with them too.
It would be an unprecedented. I think it would be an unprecedented indictment of the entire world episcopate, because aside from a few like Vigano and Schneider and Bishop Strickland, they've not spoken up on numerous occasions when they should have. So, yeah.
It's going to be interesting. The other issue is how far are they going to be willing to go with their proclamations? Are they going to condemn the Pachamama incident in the Vatican Gardens? Are they going to throw out all of his encyclicals? Are they going to throw out some of it? Are they, you know what I mean? It's like all of that. I'm not going to hold my breath on getting a thorough examination, if you know what I mean. Because if we were going to get a thorough examination, we would have already had one. But all you get is a few bishops like Athanasius, Carlo Maria Vigano, just a few people, Bishop Strickland, saying, calling these things out, and everybody else is all quiet on the Western Front.
What I would like to see is some official decisions regarding what to do if another pope like Francis arises and how to deal with that while he's in office. I think that would be very, very helpful to have on the books.
Yeah, it would.
So that we don't just have to live through a decade plus of this insanity.
I'm doing my homework and getting prepared for my pilgrimage with Strickland to Greece and Turkey. And over the weekend, I was reading about the Council of Ephesus and the heresies of Nestorius, who was the Archbishop in Constantinople. And there was a battle going on in the 5th century. It started earlier, back in the 4th century, between the See of Constantinople, which was then the capital of the Roman Empire, and then, of course, the See of Alexandria. For whatever reason, the Pope in Rome, it was a wee bit more quiet, but nonetheless, there was these two power struggles over the East. Alexandria in Egypt, Constantinople in Asia Minor. And that continued when Nestorius took his see in Constantinople. He basically started to preach against Theotokos. He didn't like the fact that they were using this word Theotokos to describe the Blessed Virgin Mary. And he wanted to say Christotokos. And this led to debates and arguments. St. Cyril in Egypt was like, no, you're wrong. Sorry, you're a heretic. And of course, everybody started to pick and choose sides. And then Pope Celestine gets involved, and he condemns Nestorius. And then the emperor forces them to get to a council in Ephesus, and Nestorius, rightly so, is condemned. But, of course, it doesn't necessarily settle it. And I guess that's where I'm getting to in all of this, is at least in the olden days, back in the good old days, the church bishops would speak up against error. They would fight it. They'd fight it out. Today, they don't fight anything out. You know what I mean? Like there's no,
and they weren't afraid
no
to say like you're a heretic for saying that.
Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
They weren't afraid to. Right? They weren't. Everything now is like this diplomatic, bureaucratic language of like appeasement, and I don't know. It's so weak.
It is weak, but like where the bishops they were passionate. They had opinions back in those days, and they weren't afraid to let them be known. And they weren't afraid to fight it out, to get into debates with each other and argue about it. Now, it's not a perfect system. I'm not looking at it with rosy lenses. It wasn't like, oh, that was so amazing. We need that back again. Listen, there was a lot of intrigue. There was a lot of sin being committed as part of that too. But at least bishops that were struggling with these heresies spoke up and said something. Today, too often bishops are afraid. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause any discord or trouble. They don't want to air their dirty laundry in public, and they will just say nothing and let these sins fester and cause grave scandal and schism within the body of Christ. And as we are told, millstones are made just for them. Mm-hmm. And it blows my mind that they're not more bothered by that. Bishop Strickland, Chesty mentions. Again, I'm so happy to see Chesty doing okay and in the chat today. Says, we'll be in good hands with Bishop Strickland. So glad that he is going to make the trip. It's wonderful. Yeah, Strickland and I are going to go to Ephesus, and we're going to tell that story right there. It's going to be amazing. Praise be to God. Theotokos rules the day at the Council of Ephesus in 431. But it just, like, where's the reality? Bishop Strickland told me that it was becoming a bishop that scared him most. And he knew that one day he'd die and have to give an account. And as a bishop, to those that are given much, much is expected. He knew that more would be expected of him. It seems like they're not afraid, these bishops. You know what I mean? Like, they seem to be not afraid of what might be coming in their judgment. That should bother them, shouldn't it?
Definitely should.
I don't know why it doesn't. Somebody said... Strickland is a great bishop. I agree, Douglas. I like him a lot, which is why I'm going to go hang out with him in Greece. Kay Grace speaks Kia. Kia? I don't even know. I have no idea. But I'm glad you're here, Kay. Thanks for hanging out. All of a sudden, everybody's also talking about my fainting spell. Aneurysms equals stroke history. Stroke patients eventually develop dementia. Joe Biden had 2 aneurysms. The first, they're talking about Joe Biden. First in 1998, we all knew. Good news for me, though, is I didn't have a stroke. I didn't have any neurological issues. They did check all of those things, and I came out okay. So hopefully I won't be as bad as Joe Biden. Scholasticus Ancorita? How do I say that? Ancorita, I guess. Accusing a pope of privately adhering to error is very different from accusing his magisterium of pernicious error. Okay, I get the distinction, but what's the follow-up to that then? Are you suggesting that we are doing one or the other? I might be suggesting both, just so you know. Lori loves Our Lady. Good morning to you. I'd be happy if the bishops simply taught the Catholic faith 100%. I know. That's such a novelty, isn't it? Such a novelty. Nelson Piers, a monk, bureaucratic or BS-cratic? I don't even know what that was about. Phil Cortens, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out. Eric Powell again says, I read about the popes of the 1500s. Wowsies. There's a lot of bad popes doing a lot of bad things. It's not new. It's definitely not new. I think one of the key differences, though, for our time, Matt, what do you think, is the fact that we have ubiquitous information almost instantaneous, right? We're more tuned in to what the popes do and don't do.
That's certainly a huge difference, but I do think it is pretty unprecedented what we've seen during the Francis pontificate. I mean, the popes that the listener is referring to are probably the morally corrupt, like personally very sinful, leading a very sinful life, but they also weren't like publicly and repeatedly propagating heresies while in office. I think that's a big difference that we've
huge.
Francis might go down in history as the first one who's really done that on a habitual basis.
Yeah. Now, I have a nuanced position about Pope Francis and his what I'm going to. This is pure speculation on my part. What I think his intentions are. Take it with a massive grain of salt because it's only my speculation. But I've had conversations with a set of Acontists on this show to look at their arguments, and I take the Athanasius Schneider position on this. I believe Pope Francis is in fact the Pope, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
He's the Pope. 100% of cardinals recognize him. 99% of world's bishops recognize him. Every foreign government considers him the head of Vatican. He wears white, wears the ring. He failed to wear the red shoes. Shame on him. But bishops make their ad limited visits to him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't have to love it. You don't have to like it, but you got to live with it. We're living with this pontificate whether we want to or not. So that's been my take on it. But my position is I don't think Francis is dumb. I think he's very intelligent. I think he knows and understands that there's a line that he cannot technically cross. You know, I believe that he tries to get as close to that line as he possibly can without technically crossing over that line. Because he knows that if he just gets close to the line, talking about, say, human fraternity, whatever, and the religious indifferentism, or all religions are equal, all religions arrive at God nonsense. I believe that he is playing with fire, knowing he's doing it, trying to ride that line, maybe even just a touch on the line, or whatever, knowing that there's plenty of people in the world, the Father James Martins of the world, the Bishop of Liechtenstein. I mean, there's just so many examples in Germany, all over the world. There's priests and parishes all over this country that are happy to take that football and cross the line all day long. Pope Francis can't do that. Why? Because he's the Pope. He can't cross that line, technically speaking. So it's my speculation that he rides it as hard as he possibly can without crossing it, knowing that someone else is, because in the minds of the lay faithful, the damage is done. Most secular lay faithful, which is the vast majority of Catholics, are going to be like, oh, we don't teach purgatory anymore. We don't teach confession anymore. We don't teach the need for redemptive grace through the sacraments anymore. We just, it's all, everything is equal. Everything is fine. Look, the Pope has been hanging out with Buddhists. Everything is okay, and whatnot. And we see these documents that seem to suggest one thing or another, while trying to give himself some sort of out in the process. I think that's nefarious. That's way more nefarious than simply coming out and saying all religions are equal. You see what I'm saying with that, Matt? What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying, that there's some level of plausible deniability in this thing. Even with the Abu Dhabi statement, the document on human fraternity, it's not like the document says Catholicism is not the one true religion. It doesn't say that, but it clearly implies that.
It implies
that all religions are equal. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Like there's not I still think it is an objectively heretical thing to say that the pluralism and the diversity of religions are willed by God in his wisdom. That is objectively false. And I think it certainly rises to the level of heresy because it's directly opposed to a truth that must be believed with divine and Catholic faith. But yeah, it's not like an unequivocal, categorical denial of an article of faith in the sense that it doesn't say the Catholic faith is not the one true religion. The document doesn't actually say that. So there is some level of deniability, I suppose.
And when Bishop Schneider confronted him on it, went and visited him to talk about that issue, he corrected that nuance, right? So again, I think it's just his plausible deniability, Peronism that we're dealing with here.
Right.
But my point to all that is, I believe that makes it even more nefarious than if he had come straight out and been as clear as possible, because it's manipulative, it's conniving, it's sneaky, right, and on the down low. It's twisting the minds of Catholics around the world into thinking subtly. It's kind of like the subtlety of what Satan said to the woman in Genesis chapter 3. Surely, God knows that you will become like him. It's like planting this seed in your mind and letting that seed, grow on its own in the mind of Eve. I think it's still along those lines. And I find that worse than if he'd come out. And I got into an argument one time with Catholics in a Bible study of sorts at our parish. This was many years ago. And they were embracing all these Catholics at this parish were embracing all manner of evil, divorce and remarriage, contraception, abortion. And I was getting sick and tired of it and arguing with them week after week and just feeling like the jerk in the room every time. I'm like, and I got up one day and I was storming out and they're like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "To talk to the Baptist. At least they're honest." And I walked out. It's like, it's like there's something to that. It's like, I'd rather deal with somebody who sincerely believes an error, but at least they're honest about, like, they're just being straightforward and they're clear. They're not trying to manipulate my mind. They're just trying to be clear about it, versus someone who only secretly believes the error and tries to manipulate me and my mind to come along. I find that terrible, like way worse. And I think that's part of what we're dealing with in this pontificate, that Peronism. Shara, by the way, Kirk B., good morning to you. The Pope knows no one will do anything about his stance. To me, he's not Catholic. And a lot of people believe that, that's for sure. Alberto, good morning, says, in some ways, I can go with permitted non-Catholic Christians. In some ways, I can go with permitted non-Catholic Christians allowed, but not the all religions ways to God. I'm not sure what that means, Alberto. Mea culpa, brother.
He can go with the God permitting, like the permissive will of God allows false religions, but doesn't actively, like, positively will them, something like that.
That's what came out of the Schneider conversation, right?
That's what, Bishop Schneider reported that's what Pope Francis told him, but then he didn't actually do anything to fix the document on human fraternity to that effect. Right. Yeah, that's the problem.
Right. Because we read it today. We read it from the Vatican's website. It's still there. They never changed anything. Let that sink in. That's what we're dealing with. Nelson Piers, monk, good morning. Says, reason for the munus of papal office is to take what was handed down and guard it against any error by always propagating it exactly. At what point does dilution of orange juice with water become water?
Never, because there's always a little bit of orange juice in the water, right?
That's called Tang. And friends, don't let friends drink Tang. Okay? just drink orange juice. I'm just saying. Tang. Also, orange juice has way too much natural sugar, which is horrible.
That's why it's good for you. It's a glass of sunshine. Drink 6 cups of orange juice a day.
Sit in the sunshine.
Drink 6 cups of orange juice a day.
There's no sugar when you're soaking in the sunshine.
Drink 6 cups of orange juice a day, and that's why orange juice is better than sunshine. Drink orange juice, folks. So good for you.
Don't do it.
Especially if you can get it freshly squeezed. Drink orange juice.
From Florida. They have to be from Florida. Otherwise, it doesn't count.
It can be from California.
Nope. Sorry. California does not count. It's got to be from Florida.
Well, poor Matthias.
Fire
Joe hates
Fire
him.
matron agree that he is nefarious, which is why we should be praying for him. How many of us are praying, fasting, and doing penance for his soul? Because God desires all men to come to salvation, to the knowledge of salvation. Jesus wants us to pray and fast and do penance for even our enemies. So if we're not praying for Pope Francis, then we are doing him a disservice. So we should be praying for him. So be sure to pray for him every single day. And he's no spring chicken, right? So you never know. Any day the shoe could drop. Antonia says an apple is like a glass of Coke. Yeah, natural sugars, horrible for you. Never have them, ever.
Yeah, only have unnatural sugars.
No, don't have those either. None. I'm just jealous. I can't have natural sugars or unnatural ones. I can have any of them. So I'm just jealous. That's all it is.
You say you can't. What you mean is you're not allowed. You're not being allowed to.
They're not good for me.
I'll bet that's the cure to your head thing, is if you had some orange juice every day.
No, actually, salt is the cure to your head thing. Having salt makes headaches go away.
We should do an experiment.
Salt is good.
We'll make Joe drink orange juice every day for a week and see if it solves his head problems.
Oh, I would happily do it. I mean, trust me, I would more like fill her up. Let's do this thing.
I'm just saying.
Can't do it. Sugar equals inflammation. Thank you, Douglas. Douglas is on my side. He understands.
Nonsense.
I am carnivore. We have the recipes. I am carnivore.
If sugar equals inflammation, Douglas, why do they put honey on wounds? Why is there evidence of them putting sugar on wounds
Don't listen to him,
Africa
Douglas.
to fix wounds?
Don't listen to him. He's a monarchist. Don't listen to him. Okay? Don't listen. We must protect our democracy from people like Jack Burton Tweedentoe. Damon, good morning to you. We're teasing, of course. John Paul Sandoval, good morning. Sunny D has solar energy, lol. Max says, pray for the church. Yay and amen. Francis looked a little thinner. He's no spring chicken. His health is not good. High five. We have the recipes. The carnivore people rule the world. That's what I'm saying. Matt, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just wondering. So I'm sure you guys have covered this, but it's been incredible to see how much discussion and outrage was sparked by what Vice President Vance said regarding the Ordo Amoris or Ordo Caritatis, where they're obviously, if you want to love your neighbor, you start with the neighbors closest to you, which are your own family members, and then work your way out from there, as if this is some kind of repudiation of the gospel message like James Martin would have us believe. It's just,
right. Yes.
It's crazy.
You know what's funny? Maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood, I don't remember exactly, I was giving talks back in the day when I used to give public talks, and it was a fun time. I gave a series of talks to a parish staff. So the priest invited me in. The entire staff was there, and I gave them almost like a mini retreat of sorts. I made that very point because I knew that this was a very liberal parish. So I sort of made this point. It's like, yes, we are to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and give shelter to the homeless. Yeah, we have to do all these things. But if you skip over the people in your family first, in your community first, to go to perfect strangers, then you have done a disservice and you have lack of charity to your family and your friends. Like it has to start at the lowest possible level. The law of subsidiarity. It's common sense,
right?
You know, I have to first feed and clothe my kids,
right? And St. Paul is very explicit about this in 1 Timothy 5, verse 8. And I know Michael Knowles and others have referenced this verse. I think Vance even has. St. Paul says, "But if any man have not care of his own, and especially those of his house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel." Ooh, that's pretty strong language.
Okay, whatever. Okay, Paul, listen. Besides that, Mrs. Kennedy, how was the parade? All right, let's just focus on the things that are important here. All right, it's like, wow, an infidel. That's pretty stark language, I would have to say. Hey, Don 41D is on the team. Good morning, Don. Praise be to God. That must be the rare few that liked Tang. Only the rich kids could have Tang. We were never able to have Tang as a kid because it was just it was only for the rich. Tang was nasty, says Mike K. I have to say that when I did drink Tang, it was like, yeah, not as good as orange juice. Okay, like maybe we should have orange juice.
The other major public outrage thing recently that I was curious if you guys had covered is Calvin Robinson. I'm sure you guys know who he is. Pretty popular on social media with the Musk, my heart goes out to you, and people going crazy thinking that he's outing himself as a Nazi or something. It's just incredible to see people say such ridiculous things.
Yes, it is. People, you can't take them serious at all. We did cover that last week on the show as well. It's just, maybe this is an opportunity for Father Calvin Robinson to come into the fullness of the faith. Maybe he'll make that leap, and who knows? Mm-hmm. We were discussing it, and I was asking the question, like, what would it take? Like, what would be the steps he would have to go through in order to re-enter the church? Because some people are speculating that, maybe he will, we had Dr. Anthony Stein on to talk about it. Well, maybe he will join the SSPX or whatever. And I'm like, golly Jews, I wonder, even if he joined the Anglican Ordinariate, I have to believe they're going to make him go through at least a shortened version of seminary all over again, just to ensure that he understands the fullness of the Catholic faith and will agree to it. But what do you speculate? Do you think he'll ever make that cross the Tiber, so to speak?
I would be surprised if it happens before we have a decent pope. Like, I think that would be, because I think what he's afraid of, he wants to be where he's not going to be canceled. And if he's going to, unfortunately, priests who are zealous about the social kingship of Christ, which I think he is, and are involved in the political discussion and things, there's always going to be somewhat of a threat of getting canceled wherever you are. And I think the threat is just as bad, if not worse, right in the Catholic Church right now in that regard. Whether he's under a bishop or, I don't know how politically active some of the, SSPX priests are. I think he would probably, even if he joined the SSPX, I think he would probably have to be a lot less high profile, probably have to be much more low profile. Yeah. So,
or even the Fraternity or Institute of Christ the King, none of those organizations are going to want him to be that public.
Yeah, they're not going to want him to be a celebrity.
No.
Priest.
So I think if he feels called to, do those things and be a high profile figure, I don't know if being a Catholic priest is going to work with that mission necessarily. I mean, it depends, I guess. But I think it's hard to convince anybody at this point to join the true church when we have Francis at the head of it. It's a very hard sell right now.
For those of us in sales, it's not easy. Okay. It's not easy. It's not working out well for us right now because we have a big gap to overcome. But, something I've said a bunch on this show, and I feel like it's important, is part of the reason why I do what I do in the industry of Catholic radio, which makes me very unique, to be honest with you, is that I want any stranger, like I see people coming and going in chat boxes and the live feeds and all that. I don't know who these people are. We often get anti-Catholic Christians in the chat box. I want them to hear that we're the first in line to call truth out, or to, in truth, call out error and call a spade a spade. We should be the first in line to do that. We shouldn't allow non-Catholics to be doing that. It should be us. We should self-regulate our own house, clean our own house up. And I want people to know that somebody is doing that. And there's lots of good people who are doing this. And for years, I've always defended Raymond DeRorio at World Over Live because he's been calling these things out for a very long time. And that's EWTN. EWTN has been, I know this from firsthand knowledge, EWTN was threatened by Parolin to their face at the Vatican a couple of years ago because of Raymond DeRorio. And still they employ him. Never fired him, never canceled him. He's there every Thursday night. Maybe it's not enough. I would argue Edward Penton has been doing a great job in reporting the issues and abuse as an EWTN journalist. So it's not just the ones we can think of all the time, like Catholic Talking Heads for like the Taylor Marshall. Matt Gaspers is a great example of that. Praise be to God. And a bunch of others have been doing it. But in the traditional Catholic media world, it's just a few. It really is just a few. And part of the reason why we do it is so that when people show up, they know, hey, we're being honest, we're being truthful, we're calling it out. It is what it is. Let the chips fall where they may. We're not going to just not talk about it simply because it's uncomfortable. I know it's not happy. It's not fun conversation all the time. There's a lot of Catholics that don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear criticisms of Pope Francis, but they need to. They need to know that there are sinners, in the hospital for sinners, staffed by saints, that there's still sinners there, and we need to be honest about it, right? So that's what it is. And let's pray, fast, and do penance. That's what we're called to. That's what we're here to do. That's our job as the church militant, to be about that business. And so let's be about it. Blaine, good morning to you. And thanks, Douglas. I appreciate you appreciating us. That's awesome. Phil Cortins, good morning, because I think God has allowed Francis in order to wake up lukewarm modern Catholics. I don't know that I disagree with that, Phil. I think that's fair. I think it's fair.
We get the leaders we deserve, right?
We do.
Don't we? I mean,
we do. We do.
It's not like the Catholic people have necessarily been putting in their work for the last century, and it's only been their leaders letting them down. This is top down and bottom up.
Do you think, Matt? Do you think more and more of the middle ground? I call them, the suburban Catholics, the go along to get along types. Do you think more of them are just kind of sick and weary of the Francis pontificate?
Honestly, I kind of wonder how much the average Catholic in the pew, and I'm talking about those who go to Mass every Sunday and are, generally faithful Catholics, how much they even know or follow what's going on with Francis. It really depends on where they're getting their church news, I suppose, because more mainstream outlets, they just kind of ignore it. They just don't cover it very much, except for those select few commentators or reporters like Edward Penton or Diane Montagna or Raymond Arroyo, like you mentioned. There just aren't very many that even talk about it. And even if their reporters and commentators want to talk about it, the editors won't let them because they know that the publisher will get upset or whatever. So, I mean, if their main source of church news is the diocesan publication or website or Catholic news agency or whatever, they probably don't even know the depth of the problem. That would be my guess.
Whew. Let that sink in. Douglas says Matt is right. We have to dig for the truthful answers. I would also suggest looking at a plurality of news outlets, right? Talking head commentary outlets. Look at a bunch. I watched The Remnant, all the time. I interviewed him when I was in Rome and included him in my documentary film on the end times. I watched The Remnant. You mentioned Diane Montagna. I like Diane Montagna's reportage. I follow her on X, but I also follow a bunch of others. I love Lifeside News. I had Michael Haynes on last week. I really enjoy talking to Michael and his reportage quite a bit. So there's a lot of people that I will follow, EWTN and other outlets as well, just to kind of get a full picture of what some of these stories are. And then really figure out who's delivering you the goods and who isn't, right? I think that's important to do.
Yeah, and I think there are good people working at all of those outlets. I mean, the ones you obviously want to avoid I guess you can go see what the enemy is plotting or what the leftist spin is if you go read like the National Catholic Reporter, or as it used to be called by some, the National Catholic Distorter. That's probably more accurate.
I look at it.
Or like America Magazine,
saying.
Which you got to see. You got to see what the other side is saying as well. So,
yeah, you definitely do. I find it fascinating when they report on things that, like, lately, I guess there's been a couple of examples lately, but just like, wow, I didn't expect the National Catholic Reporter to report on that. There's been a couple of those lately too, which is surprising to me because they're definitely on the team, so to speak. Damien,
it's really
says,
funny.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, shortly after I became the managing editor of Catholic Family News, America Magazine somehow got my name and my home address. I have no idea how. And they started sending me physical copies of America Magazine. They still do. They're trying to convert me or something. I don't know.
It's like getting a Jehovah's Witness material. You're just like, I don't know that I should touch it. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I need to take a bath right now. Yikes. That's hilarious. My wife used to be, back in the day when we adopted our oldest son and we started homeschooling, and And we made the decision for her to quit her job. She made more money than I did. She was a paralegal. And I had to take three jobs just to make ends meet. But we were struggling, and she briefly became a school bus driver so that we can make a little extra money, which was horrible. I feel bad about it. Trust me, I've had to repent of that, like making my wife drive someone else's crazy kids to school and back. But nonetheless, because she's got that school bus driver, to this day, we've moved states. They followed us from New Hampshire to Texas. Communist magazines, just like the union labor rags of communism, they show up to our house in the mailbox. It's still addressed to her, and it's been 20 some years. It's like, man, once the enemy gets you, boy, they never let you loose. They never let you off the hook. But anyway, Matt Gaspers, That Music Means We're Out of Time. Great to have you on today. God bless you, my friend. Thanks for doing it. Appreciate your insight and your perspective on all of this. We're going to keep you in our prayers. And everybody else, thank you for hanging out with us today. I think tomorrow on the team, tomorrow morning, we're going to have Danny Fitzpatrick. He's got a crisis article over on AI. We'll talk to him. Maybe Father Jason Sharon, too. Who knows? We'll see.